Так, добрый вечер. Вот, сегодня нас собралось не так уж не сильно много.
Из-за вчерашнего айфорума не все доехали.
Да, наверное, не все отдохнули. Вот, сегодня у нас в гостях Том Хикерсон. Вот, сначала он расскажет о том, чему научился.
Ты можешь слово говорить, что ты можешь.
Ну вот, да.
Чуть-чуть про маркетологию, скажем так.
Да, вот просто тема, которая была у меня в письме, была чуть другой, поэтому я потерялся немного, думаю, странные слова тут. Вот. Ну, в общем, предлагаю начинать. Вот. Я рад, что вы все до нас дошли, пришли. Вот. И мы с удовольствием слушаем Тома. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое. Like I did a quick poll of the people in the hall earlier, and we all voted that I would speak English. However, you can always maybe vote for Russian halfway through the speech, and I can switch over to Russian a little bit later. So first of all, I just want to say thank you very much to the staff at Boomin, to Dmitry, to Sergey, to the Valley for letting me speak today. I'm really excited about the work that you all are doing here, and I hope to become more acquainted with each and every one of you as time goes on. As for myself, my name is Tom Hickerson, and I've actually been living and working in Kharkov since, on and off since 1995. But what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is some time when I didn't work in Kharkov. Actually, for a small period of time, I worked in Microsoft, and more specifically in Microsoft Russia, where I was working as a project manager in the marketing department. And why do I want to talk about that? Because for most of my life, I've been working in startups, in small companies, in small businesses. Microsoft was the one opportunity I had to work at a company which is basically the best at what they do, which is selling software to consumers and selling software to businesses. So it was a very thrilling, exciting experience, but there was also a lot of hard work, and I feel like I came away with a better respect, a better knowledge for what marketing is and what it is all about. Marketing is kind of that one thing that's a little bit elusive for people in IT. It's somewhat of an art, somewhat of a science. Oftentimes, when people see the success of a business, there's nobody there saying, "Oh, хорошие маркетологи такие, oh, молодцы маркетологи, marketing department, наверное, самый лучший." They don't usually say that. However, when marketing goes bad, there's always someone to blame.
It's true.
Right. So, for example, does anybody remember what this is from? This is actually a photograph from Moscow around 2007, 2008, from the metro of Moscow in 2007, 2008. Let me give you a little bit of background on this particular photograph, which I took myself on the way to work. Google came to Russia sometime around 2006, 2007. They weren't really interested in Russia before then. And in every country that they had come to, all the countries were like, "Ooh, Google, we love you." And they instantly became number one search engine in most of the countries they went to. In Europe, and England, and Canada, and Italy, that was the case. In Russia, and in Ukraine, that was not the case, because there was somebody there, and their name was Yandex. And Yandex was number one, and they were like looking to see, well, how can we be Yandex? How can we be Yandex? Well, you know what? Yandex advertises on the metro. Let's advertise on the metro too. And this is what happened. Did they become number one after this? No. However, it is and obviously someone got fired because, that wasn't very successful for them. But it shows an example of how marketing can seem like a really good idea, but it comes off looking a little weird, especially if it's planned by somebody who's not originally from the region. Like people probably not from Russia made this idea happen. So my point is that many times marketing, if you do something famously bad, and believe me, Microsoft is famous for doing famously bad stuff in marketing, people will remember. But when they do very successful things, sometimes people tend to credit other people. So again, I just want to talk a little bit about the experience I had in Microsoft. I put up a little bit about all the stuff I did previous to Microsoft and afterwards. Like I pointed out, I worked mostly in small companies. I actually started in Kharkov in 1995, not in IT, big shocker. I actually worked in a non-governmental organization that was called the American Councils for Teachers of Russian. I don't know if you've ever heard of that organization, but they did a lot of recruiting for programs like Freedom Support Act, Muskie Fellowships, Fulbright Fellowships, and so we did a lot of work sending Ukrainians to study in the United States. However, when I went back to the United States, I worked at another small company for recruiting. After that, I went to another small company. You can see kind of the theme here. Of course, one of these things is not like the other, but that is when I went to go to Russia. And I got into Russia, luckily, due to a program known as the Alpha Bank Fellowship Program. Because after working for 3 or 4 years, sending Ukrainians and Russians to study in the United States, somebody said, Mikhail Friedman thought maybe it would be a great idea to bring Americans to Russia and teach them about how to live and work in Russia. And so Mikhail Friedman and his friend Peter Evan basically hired about 10 or 12 Americans a year to come to Moscow. They've been doing that since 2005. The program's still going on because it's not dependent upon politics. I think the politics between Russia and the U.S. are not that great right now, so if it was dependent upon the State Department, we might have a problem continuing it, but since it's Mikhail Friedman, he's okay. After that, after Microsoft Russia, I actually went back to work in startups, and I'm working in startups today where I'm working for a company called Zenoways, and we actually are a startup based in biotechnology and clinical research. So if you want to ask about biotechnology and clinical research, that's a whole other speech, and I can tell you about marketing in that space too, but that is also a whole other speech. So what is the point of my speech today? I actually put up this very pretty mountain. This is a picture of Mount Hood in Portland, Oregon. This is a picture of, my parents live in Portland, and they see this in the background almost every day. And Microsoft, or any big company, is much like that. It's in the background, but not that many people go there. So, quite frankly, I wanted to tell this story as someone who's actually been to the mountain, who's actually climbed the mountain, who's actually been around the mountain, and come back and kind of tell you a little bit about what it's like inside Microsoft to work with the marketing department, especially a very large subsidiary like Russia. An interesting thing about startups is that many of you are probably starting up a small company today, and you may not care a lot about Microsoft, or you may not think a lot about marketing. You may still be in stealth mode, for all I know. But the interesting potential about each and every one of you in a startup is that you could go to the mountain yourself one of these days. You could be bought by Microsoft, or by Google, or by Yahoo. Or even better, you could build your own mountain right next to this one. Maybe not quite as big, but also something that could have as much potential as the companies that we're currently working with today. So why think about marketing, especially if you're a startup? Many of you, like I said, might be just very starting out. You might be just starting out right now, and you might think, well, you know, we're just basically building a product. We're not really concerned that much with marketing right now. We're only maybe 2 people. We're growing. We just really have to worry about investment. But quite frankly, you really want to know a little bit more about why large companies do marketing and why. Because as a startup, you're probably going out and you're probably trying to attract outside investment. And if you come across a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more intelligent, a little bit more reasonable about how you're doing marketing, if you come across a little bit more sophisticated about how you're doing marketing, that will make you that much more competitive than all the other startups that are commanding that investor's attention. So, for example, you might be able to come across as a little bit more responsible with marketing money, because as an investor, probably the questions you're going to be asked when you have to pitch your startup to an investor are questions like, what's the size of your market? How much money do you plan to make in 5 years? What's your first marketing campaign going to look like? How successful was your last marketing campaign? And these are all questions that if you come across a little bit more confident and a little bit more intelligent, that will raise a green flag in the investor's eyes. That'll make you stand out among all the other hopefuls that are trying to come to get investment here in Ukraine. So I said a little bit about myself earlier. I said that I worked with a lot of small companies, and then thanks to Misha Friedman, I was able to go to Microsoft Russia. I want to talk a little bit about my initial impression about Microsoft from the inside. And then I want to talk a little bit more about the marketing and some strategies that you might be able to take back and use for yourself. Now, my first impression was that, like many of you, I thought that Microsoft was something in the background. It was just something that maybe, every once in a while I used. Well, a lot of the time I used. But my first impression upon actually starting to work at Microsoft as an employee within the Russian side was that Microsoft is really big. It's much bigger than the way it looks on the outside. As an example, one of the things that people were discussing in Microsoft, I started working there as kind of the Alpha Fellow sometime in about 2007. And one of the big concerns was there was an email around the Russian side saying, you know what? Gazprom is going to have more market capitalization than Microsoft. We're threatened by that because Microsoft actually has the #1 market capitalization in the world at that time. Now I'm not so sure. Now I think Apple has tracked them out. But back in 2006, when the economy was still good, Gazprom and Microsoft were neck and neck for market capitalization. What do I mean when I say market capitalization? I mean the entire net worth of the company was, say, in the realm of $250 billion, and Gazprom was somewhere there as well. Think about that for a moment. Gazprom makes gas. It is something that you need to survive in the Russian winter. If you don't have gas, you could die. Whereas Microsoft, you could probably live without Microsoft Word over a winter's time. You could live without Excel. You could live without OS 2, or the Microsoft OS. You could live without Xbox, probably. But all the same, Microsoft is still as big as Gazprom, and now, currently, based on this screenshot, much, much bigger. So, again, the market capitalization I just pointed out right here is $255 billion versus 89. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, that's not quite fair, Mr. Hickerson. I mean, Gazprom is a completely different industry, completely different company. You should compare it against somebody who's like much more related to Microsoft. And this is very small font, I apologize for that, but basically this is a comparison of Microsoft and all of its competitors like IBM, Oracle, Cisco, Sony, Red Hat's down there somewhere. And again, Microsoft is still on top at $255 billion. So you have to ask yourself, if Microsoft is really only selling software services, stuff you can survive without, how strong is their marketing department? How much is that is based on marketing alone? Especially keep in mind that, for example, Red Hat Linux is stuff that you can download off the web for free. They still have a market capitalization of $7 billion. That's also pretty special. So, interestingly enough, marketing at Microsoft is also a very big business. They do support a lot of money behind it. Most recently, they rolled out Windows 8, and they pledged $1.5 billion to spend money on it. And even more interesting is that actually at the end of this article here, they basically say that they had a marketing budget that was 10 digits. 10 digits, how much is that? That's $1 trillion. So they have a lot of power and money behind the marketing department of Microsoft. So that was my very first impression, is that basically whatever you could do, if you wanted to bring your ideas to the table and try to implement a marketing campaign, you could probably find the money to do it. You would have to push quite a bit, but you could find the money. That was not a question. However, as I began to work at Microsoft day after day after day, I started to think to myself, how do you organize something that big? I mean, even Microsoft started small a long, long time ago. This is Bill Gates' first business card when he was still based in New Mexico, not even in Redmond, Washington. So this is based back in the day when,
numbers too.
Sure, let's maybe, who knows? No, I bet you. This is on the internet, so I'm sure, somebody calls once a day. I'm pretty sure. I just got it off the internet. So, Steve Jobs' old numbers up there too. Somewhere. That one might not work. But But the question is, how, if you have that many resources and you are worldwide, across the entire planet, how do you marshal your troops? Because let's face it, there are 55,000 people working at Microsoft. That is like an entire army's worth of people. How do you marshal people like that to actually organize and generate something of value? How do you people, like for example, how would you organize something like the Windows 8 rollout in all countries in the world? So I started taking a deeper look into what type of language, what type of documents, what type of organization Microsoft had in order to make sure that all their marketing campaigns were coordinated, all their marketing campaigns were organized, and they were focusing on specific goals. And what I found was that Microsoft starts with a very simple message, because the problem is very global, and it's something about strategy and consulting that many companies sometimes get right, sometimes get wrong. If you're going to countries that, for example, don't speak very good English, let's face it, you know, if you're going to Germany, France, Italy, that's one thing. If you're going to sub-Saharan Africa, that's completely different. If you're going to China, that's something completely different as well. And your product, let's face it, is very sophisticated. Teaching people how to use Word in China, you know, might be something that's a little bit of a learning curve. And more importantly, you want to be sure that you can come back, that people can come back to you and report that they have been spending money on marketing campaigns and have been working on marketing campaigns and have been providing growth for your company. What do? How do you organize that? How do you rally people behind a message? And I want to say that Microsoft does it internally, and I want to stress internally, with 4 basic goals, 4 basic words. Win, drive, grow, and people. Those are the 4 basic words that they use internally. Now, if you go searching on the public internet and you start to say, like, let's look for Microsoft goals, you won't necessarily find this on the public internet. They keep it pretty well hid because, of course, the first 3 goals are all about sales, and they want the public perception to be a little bit more warm than just a company that's focused on sales. But internally, there is a lot of discussion around these 4 goals. And how do they frame these 4 goals? How do they organize them? How do they make them stick within the minds of every single Microsoft employee? They link them specifically with 8 marketing objectives. And so they already take these 4 words and start to split them up into different marketing objectives, different marketing outcomes, and actually have specific examples at the end of the reporting year that they can point to and say, our subsidiary did this. You know, we grew in, for example, creating awareness, or we grew in, for example, generating leads or optimizing opportunities. A lot of Microsoft Russia's work was actually behind these 2 objectives, which was basically generating leads is basically a synonym of finding new people to sell to. And optimizing opportunities is basically a synonym of finding the old customers you had and selling more stuff to them. So basically, new customers and old customers. And a lot of the generating leads and optimizing opportunities was data that I was tasked with managing is a better word, to report back to Western Europe and to the United States. And alongside me were many of my colleagues in Microsoft Russia who were working on different things, much like driving deployment, creating awareness, building communities. Also very interesting to point out that there was always a component of people. So Microsoft was always working on educating and building their own marketing talent. Tak što můžeme dělat už přejdu na Rusku, no? So one of the things that I found out in Microsoft was that marketing also meant metrics. Lots and lots of metrics. Microsoft likes to keep track of many different campaigns. So over here, there are always many different campaigns and the marketing objectives that they had over here on the top. And again, you'll see up here at the top is there win, drive, grow, and people. So those 4 words were omnipresent in all the places that Microsoft usually forecast metrics and put out metrics for the subsidiary. So we don't have to spend a lot of time focusing on this. This is 5 years old. It's old news anyway. But the important part to take part is that many people in the startup world may think, well, marketing, it's just art, it's just like PR, it's just, stuff. But there are serious numbers that you can generate in a marketing department that you can then take back to whoever is your investor. In this case, it's the shareholders of Microsoft Inc. and show them exactly the type of process that you've been working on. Marketing is also how you can show data to other people. And this is a slide I want to actually talk a little bit more about because this might be something interesting that you can actually take back to your own companies and use for yourself. While I was working a lot with generating leads and optimizing opportunities, I started to take a look at how Microsoft would organize their marketing campaigns. And one of the objects that Microsoft used in managing their data is that they were very strict about how they would manage data that comes in, and they would treat it as much like a funnel. So they would have, say for example, they would have an event, like this event, all of us here. And they would say, thanks a lot for coming to this event. We want to entertain you. We want to tell you about Microsoft products. And by the way, you can enter your business card and give us your email message or your email address, and we'll send you more information about Microsoft. And so they would collect all the emails from the event. And this would be like your first ring of the funnel. And then the next ring of the funnel would be an email. And they'd send out an email and say,